Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar in our series of annual conference webinars, which are taking place over this week and next. This is the third day. I am Councillor Izzi Seccombe. I'm leader of the LGA's Conservative group and leader of Warwickshire County Council. And before we hear from the Secretary of State, I would like to mention a couple of housekeeping points. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded, and if you would like to ask any questions, please do use the Q&A function and the upvote function, which prioritises those questions. We will be finishing the webinar at 10 minutes to 3, as the Secretary of State has a ministerial meeting which he has to attend, and I'm very grateful to him for joining us today. I'd like to thank very much our sponsors. These are our regular sponsors of the LGA conference, the Cllr, for their support in helping us to put on this series of webinars. And I do recommend you to look at the work that they do and how they help councils. And so I am really delighted to welcome Robert Jenrick, the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, to our virtual conference. Robert was appointed to the post last July, and prior to that was Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, so has absolutely bounds of information and help to support us in local government. Without further ado, Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Robert Jenrick. Over to you.
Thank you, Izzi, and good afternoon, everyone. It goes without saying that we've been living through some extraordinary times, and the fact that as a country we've risen to meet them is down in no small part to many of the extraordinary people who are joining us on the line today. I think back to the comments that the Queen made on VE Day when she said that we're still a nation, that those brave soldiers, sailors and airmen would recognise and admire. And I've no doubt that when she said that, the Queen was speaking in part about your staff in councils and about your communities. You and your staff really are unsung heroes who have worked tirelessly to get us through the crisis, from protecting vulnerable people to keeping essential public services going, like the bins being collected, mobilising hundreds of thousands of volunteers, keeping schools open for the children of key workers and the vulnerable, keeping our parks open. You've made such a huge contribution to our national effort. And I want to say on behalf of the Prime Minister and the whole government, a big thank you to you, which I hope you in turn can pass on to everyone who works in each of your councils. And now that we look to the future, the heroes of the pandemic are becoming the heroes of our national recovery, with businesses starting up again, with high streets in your communities and mine beginning to spring back to life, house building and construction projects starting again, places of worship reopening, and life events like weddings beginning once again in the month of July. And more broadly, people the length and breadth of the country beginning to enjoy the freedoms that we took for granted before COVID, and which for perfectly understandable reasons have had to be curtailed. I don't think in my lifetime I can think of another occasion on which local councils have played a more important, a more central role in the life of the country and our national mission than over the course of the last 2 or 3 months. So I want to begin by saying how incredibly grateful all of us in government are for everything that you've been doing, for working with us so closely to achieve some remarkable feats for which you should be rightly proud. Things that in normal times might have taken years to achieve have been done in a matter of weeks. And some of those have truly been silver linings in the dark cloud of COVID. I think in particular about your work in helping almost 15,000 vulnerable people, many of whom were sleeping rough at the start of the pandemic, into safer accommodation, which has undoubtedly protected hundreds, if not thousands, of people's lives. And now your work on that mission to ensure that those people don't go back onto the streets, and that as many of them as possible can be moved into better move-on accommodation, using some of the funding that we're bringing forwards to buy 6,000 new units in all parts of the country, and creating a new national asset of move-on accommodation akin to the one created by my predecessor many years ago, George Young, in the 1990s. Instances like that, I think, show what local government adds to this country and how important it is that we have a strong and productive relationship between central and local government. And when we do, we can really achieve great things. It's meant that through your hard work, we've been able to get extra funding that we've provided for other important missions, like, for example, on domestic violence, something that I care very much about and have wanted to ensure that we have the protections in place through the legal changes we're making in the longer term in Parliament at the moment, but which will require practical implementation on the ground. And it's meant a huge effort to support hundreds of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses, 800,000 in total. And I've been very inspired by everything that you've done in partnership with the voluntary sector in your communities. For example, supporting the clinically extremely vulnerable who have been shielding, from the tailored food boxes that you've helped to deliver, complementing the national food boxes that we've been delivering, to the mental health support, the check-in and chat services that have been done in all parts of the country. And as a result of that effort, and the 3 million food boxes that have now been delivered, again, we've helped to shield and to protect millions of people through the pandemic, and undoubtedly, as a result of that, to save people's lives. I've been very touched by the emails and messages that I've received, and my department has, which have been people across the country showing their thanks for that work, sometimes thanking central government for the food boxes that we've delivered, but very often thanking their local council for the touching and personal support that you've provided to those individuals. One of the most poignant moments that I can remember in recent weeks was when I received an email from a 5-year-old boy from Corby called Caden, who lives with cystic fibrosis, and he and his mother were shielding and relying upon the food boxes that have been delivered and the support of their local council. And I remember a week later, Caden received a call from Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, and they spoke about the shielding programme. And I'll never forget how happy he was to receive that call, and grateful for the support that his local council, working in harmony and productive partnership with central government, had managed to achieve to help him and his mum. And speaking to colleagues from across the country here in Parliament, I know that there are countless other examples where people have come together and have gone the extra mile and achieved great things for their communities through small acts of kindness and courage, small acts that together have made a huge difference. But I wanted to say that the current situation in Leicester clearly reminds us that there's no room for complacency. It's an echo of the difficult days that we faced at the height of the pandemic, and a reminder that there's still a great deal of work to be done to weather the storms of the pandemic, and that we in central government and you in local government still have a big task to work together to get the country through this. And I'm going to say a bit more in a moment about Leicester and about how we're going to work, I hope, productively on local lockdowns in the future. I'm under absolutely no illusion about the profound impact that this emergency has had on local government, both personally, the huge effort, as I said, that local councillors and officers have put in, but also financially. And I said, as did the Chancellor Rishi Sunak at the start of the crisis, that we would ensure that councils have the resources that you need to weather this storm. And I meant it, and I know the Chancellor meant it as well. I said that I would champion your cause within government, that I would fight your corner, and I meant it. Since the start of the crisis, we've provided more than £27 billion of funding to get councils, local businesses, and communities through COVID-19, including £3.8 billion of new funding to councils, over £20 billion in support for local businesses, including pausing business rates and offering the additional grant funding that councils have been so superb at getting out to the front line, over £5 billion in cash flow support for councils, and latterly £105 million to support rough sleepers, as well as £500 million in council tax hardship funds to offer absolutely vital economic support to the most vulnerable. But I think it's important that we don't get lost in these very large numbers. There are individual stories behind each of these figures. I think of my own constituency and the hard work that my local council has put in Newark and Sherwood, like Beaumont House, our local hospital in Newark. They've been able to access small business grants to keep their charity shops going and have been supported by funding specifically made available by the government for hospices. I think of victims of domestic abuse in my own constituency, like our local refuge, which has been able to weather the storm and to put in place extra capacity so that as lockdown eases and more victims of domestic abuse require housing and support, the funding and capacity should be there. And if it isn't, there's more work for us to do in the future to ensure that we make it available. But from the discussions that I've had over the past few weeks, I appreciate the very clear concern from councils about the future. Many councils are worried about the financial burdens of COVID-19, and I want to provide the certainty and the stability that you need to plan for the rest of the financial year. And that's why today I'm announcing the next stage of our plan. And this, I hope, will provide you with that certainty and provides, for the first time, a comprehensive plan which covers the three central pillars of support: COVID-19 related expenditure, irrecoverable income losses, and then losses in tax revenue. This is a more sophisticated plan developed in conversation with the LGA and has been designed to give council leaders and officers the confidence to continue to deliver essential public services for the rest of the financial year. You've stepped up and supported people in their time of need, and I want central government to step up and to support you too. So moving forwards, it's difficult to forecast accurately the true financial consequences of COVID-19 on all councils, but it is clear that many have incurred significant costs. But whether these costs continue or begin to gradually decline depends on the virus itself. Councils have seen a reduction in tax revenue, but as with everything, the scale of this reduction will be in line with the scale of the wider economic disruption, and we'll learn more about that in the months to come. And similarly, with the third pillar, councils have lost a great deal of income from sales, from fees and charges since the start of the pandemic. Across the country, car parks and museums and leisure centres have been closed for the past few months, and I know that's had a very significant impact on many councils' finances. Many of these, I'm delighted to say, are either open again or will be shortly as we move into the phase beginning on the 4th of July. And these revenue streams should start to slowly recover, depending on the speed and the scale of our national economic recovery. So I think what is important with these points in mind is the need for a comprehensive plan which is flexible enough to adapt to the needs of local councils and to the different possible scenarios ahead. And that's exactly what we're announcing today. So if I can speak briefly to each of the three pillars. Firstly, for COVID-related expenditure, this morning I'm announcing that councils in England will receive a further £500 million to support their communities, which takes the total support provided by government to £4.3 billion over the course of the last 2 or 3 months. Recognising that councils are best placed to decide how to meet pressures in their local areas, this funding isn't going to be ring-fenced. The government will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with councils and communities as we recover from this pandemic, and to renew our commitment to unite and to level up the country. We have a Prime Minister who truly understands the needs of local government. He is, after all, the first mayor to become Prime Minister since Clement Attlee. So the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and I are all united in our confidence and determination that you as councils will receive the funding that you need to meet COVID-related expenditure. And the £500 million that I'm adding today is the next stage in that process. But I want you to have the reassurance that should further funding be required later in the year to meet those legitimate costs that we've asked of you and which you stepped up to deliver, then obviously I'll do my very best to ensure that you receive that from the Treasury. Now, to turn to the second pillar, which is non-tax income, I'm pleased to announce a major new scheme today, which will help to reimburse the majority of lost income during the pandemic and to boost cash flow. I'm announcing the scheme now, as I recognise that you need certainty to continue delivering local public services. We all know that these income streams vary from year to year, but for some councils, this year's losses have been unparalleled. So where these losses are more than 5% of your planned income, I will cover from the Exchequer 75p in every pound that you lose. This is an unprecedented commitment by central government. This means that if your council has a car park or a museum, a theatre or a leisure centre that you run directly, we will support you and meet 75% of your costs. We'll be writing to you as soon as possible with more details of how the scheme will operate. And obviously the beauty of this scheme is that it will flex up and down depending on the true cost to local councils that we will only learn over the course of the year. If some of the more conservative estimates are true, then this will cost less to the Exchequer. If some of the larger estimates that I've seen turn out to be correct, then it will cost significantly more, potentially many billions of pounds. But you as council leaders and chief executives have the confidence to know that central government is standing behind you in either of those scenarios. And I think that's what matters now, to give you the confidence, to give you the stability and certainty that you need to move forwards for the rest of the financial year. And thirdly, the last pillar is about tax. To further support you, we're announcing today that tax deficits can be repaid over 3 years rather than the usual one, giving you more flexibility in your budgets, relieving pressure at a difficult time. No one knows today with certainty how much tax loss will materialise, which is why at the spending review, the government will agree a fair apportionment of irrecoverable council tax and business rates losses between central and local government for 2020-21. But I hope that you will see from the approach that we've taken to the second pillar on irrecoverable income losses, which are non-tax related, the way in which we intend to approach these challenges, to ensure a fair apportionment and to ensure that you have the certainty that you need to move forwards with confidence. And we'll continue to keep under review local authorities' cash flow position for the rest of the financial year, as the impact of the existing cash flow measures becomes apparent. These measures together show our commitment to support local government, not just during the pandemic, but beyond it. But of course, recognising the huge diversity of local government, the diversity of councils and individual circumstances, which I see every day and I hear from the conversations that I have with local council leaders, we appreciate that there may be some exceptional circumstances, and we don't want to see any councils faced with unmanageable costs. So I would strongly encourage councils who have those concerns to come to me and to come to my council, to my department officials. And my door is always open to have those conversations. Any council leader who wants to speak with me, I will be, I give you my word that I'm at the end of a phone line, very happy to discuss your needs. Now, I wanted to say a few words about the situation in Leicester. On Saturday, we'll ease the national lockdown further, helping to revive the economy, opening local businesses and tourism, and enabling friends and family to spend more time together. We all welcome that, but no one should think that the virus has gone away, that this is mission accomplished. Your leadership in your communities is absolutely vital to keep the incidence of the virus down. And in some places like Cllr, Ashford, Weston-super-Mare, local leaders have tackled outbreaks quickly and have got the virus back under control. And I'm very grateful for their actions. In Leicester, the government has taken national action to ensure that we delay the easing of measures and again, closing non-essential retail in the city. You are all essential to controlling outbreaks. And I'd like to take this opportunity to urge you to impress upon your communities the need to adhere to public health advice, to socially distance, to wear masks on public transport, to keep washing your hands. These simple actions remain the most important ones. And local councils must monitor the application of COVID secure guidance and take action where you see breaches. But still, there can be local outbreaks, as we're seeing in Leicester, at which point you must do everything you can to act quickly and decisively with track and trace, engaging with your local communities, with Public Health England and others. If you don't act, the virus, as we know, can take hold. If necessary, the government will take national action to stop the risk of the virus spreading more widely. We'll keep driving up our testing capacity, which is already at over 280,000 a day, and we've made £300 million of funding available for local track and trace efforts to help you develop tailored outbreak control plans together with local NHS and blue light partners. But I'm not going to pretend that this is all easy. It needs a joined up approach from every part of government, an approach that involves local resilience forums, being ready to respond at short notice, very active policing, clear communications, a community-focused strategy using multiple languages where needed, of course, and access to the right data at the right times. And there's obviously a role for central government there to ensure that you have that data and that it works for you, so you understand what's happening in your local communities. We've always said that lifting the lockdown was conditional. So while I hope Leicester will be the last local outbreak of coronavirus, of course, we have to be ready and prepared for more in other parts of the country. And we have to learn the lessons from Leicester and other places as we move forwards. For those people who are shielding, this I know will continue to be a nervous time. The individuals asked to shield are now advised that they can enjoy much greater freedom with a pause in the shielding programme from Monday and a relaxation of guidance from the start of August. But we have to remain vigilant. It will take all of our collective resolve and discipline to keep the virus at bay. And we must continue to work very closely and be ready to change the advice if, unfortunately, we have to. I think this is a critical moment in so many ways, but it's also a moment that we have to seize as a country. We have a unique chance to tackle some of the country's great unresolved challenges, like rough sleeping. We're stepping up our efforts to stop people returning to our streets after COVID, but we have to have a broader mission now to end rough sleeping once and for all. We now have a unique opportunity to get the people the right support and to help them to rebuild their lives. The £105 million in additional funding that we've made available last week will support councils to ensure longer term solutions are put in place instead of simply the emergency accommodation that we've used during the pandemic. And this is on top of the 6,000 new supported homes that we're bringing forward to help rough sleepers, 3,000 plus of which will be available in the next 12 months. The final part of our social recovery I want to reflect on is the vital work that you've been doing to support adult social care throughout the pandemic. We've provided you most recently with £600 million to pay for infection control in care homes, and we need to get that money out to the front line as quickly as possible. But we understand the challenges that you face, and we'll continue to work with you to monitor the situation. And I can assure you won't hesitate to take decisive action where it's needed. Matt Hancock, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, asked me to pass on his own message of thanks to the sector today, because we understand just how important adult social care is. That's been displayed vividly during the crisis, and how important it is that we now move forward and get this right for the future. As the Prime Minister recently reminded us, we have to look after those people who've looked after us during the crisis. And that's why we won't wait to fix the problems in social care. We're finalising our plans. We will try to build the cross-party consensus that we promised. And we will try to ensure that the voice of local government is heard in those plans as we prepare them, publish them, and seek broad consent for them. Local government will also be at the heart of our economic recovery as well, and our broader mission as a government, the one we were elected upon at the end of last year, to level up and unite our country. And as the Prime Minister set out on Tuesday, we're committed to delivering an infrastructure revolution in each and every part of the country. We're determined not to waste any more time to get our mission to build the country forwards, to build back better, and to have a new deal to get Britain building. And at the heart of this mission is our plans to update our out-of-date planning system, to breathe new life into town centres and high streets, and to ensure that vacant buildings are given new opportunities for businesses to thrive and for people to get jobs going in those parts of the country. And we've also launched this week, as you may have seen, our £900 million Getting Building Fund, which will deliver shovel-ready projects, smaller infrastructure projects in all parts of the country. The allocations for that have been made today, and local councils and LEPs can be involved in the next 2 weeks in determining which projects should move forwards. The money will then flow, and we want to get shovels in the ground as quickly as possible, meaning that new projects, new ideas, new jobs, all of them can be created in this financial year. I'm looking forward to working with local leaders to deliver public buildings like schools and hospitals, and to ensure that we build them as quickly as possible to meet the expectation of the public and our manifesto commitments to build those 40 new hospitals, to ensure there are new schools and GP surgeries, the public services that people want to see delivered. We're also accelerating our £3.6 billion Towns Fund to help the 100 towns and communities build more prosperous futures and innovative plans for regeneration. And I would like to see as many of those 100 town deals be announced this year to get shovels in the ground and to boost confidence in those communities. There also, I think, needs to be no limit to our ambition to build beautiful, good quality, safe, low carbon homes especially on brownfield sites. And with the lifting of the HRA cap, that's an ambition that we all must share responsibility for. But the pandemic, I think, has brought about, and will, a profound rethink of the way that we live and we work. We've seen how our councils can be key to boosting health and skills and education of people in every part of the country, and giving them the confidence to stay, to raise families, and to start businesses. We're building today the foundations for future prosperity tomorrow, raising our sights to when we are a fully independent, self-governing country for the first time in 45 years. We now have a chance to shift power, not just from Brussels, but from Whitehall as well. And so the Prime Minister has asked me to publish our recovery and devolution white paper later this year, and to set out an ambitious plan which will be place-based regional economic strategy, one which helps us to kickstart the recovery and to level up. And my colleague Simon Clark will be talking in greater detail about our plans on that agenda tomorrow. But once again, I want that to be jointly commissioned between central government and local government, and for your views to be at the heart of our ideas and policies. I'm clear when it comes to devolution, we'll be building on what we know works, empowering local councils to lead the economic recovery, ensuring that councils can play a fulsome role in health and education in local communities, facilitating local government reorganisation where there is local demand for it, more metro mayors where local communities want them, driving growth across economic areas that make sense, where there's local interest, and where it can be done in harmony with local identities and to the benefit of local economies and the delivery of local public services. And more dynamic regional partnerships like the Midlands Engine and the Northern Powerhouse, but also in other parts of the country, helping our regions to gain a global footprint and ensure that all parts of Whitehall are working for those local areas. For me, it's about strengthening and empowering local leadership and local institutions to be the drivers of future prosperity, providing power back to local communities. Like the rest of the world, we faced the devastating impact of COVID-19. We've been tested in ways we couldn't have imagined a year ago, but it is thanks to your efforts that we are beginning to turn a corner. The lockdown is coming to an end, the economy is beginning to move forwards, and the recovery is starting. And if we can show the same kind of unity that we saw at the height of the crisis, there's no doubt in my mind that we will get through this, and that the heroes of the pandemic will be the heroes of the recovery. It's a moment to strengthen our resolve and to come together as central and local government to deliver for the British people. And I will continue to do everything I can to keep delivering for you and to strengthen the bonds between national and local government to do just that. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
And I'm hoping very much you'd be good enough to take a few questions. We've had 91 inputs into the Q&A. Clearly we won't manage all that. So it's down to me to try to capture just a few of those and get the essence of what's coming through the questions. So I'm going to start with the first that came, but this was a matter that came up in a few, and it was from John Fuller, who is the District Council Network lead, and he was talking about the role of local government in stabilising the economy with the support of the government, and how we need to be at the centre of the local economy, trying to build that role to get the national economy and the local economy running and off that. Would it be okay if I took 2 or 3? Is that all right? then I think what I will also add is there's another one from Robert Alden from Birmingham, who's the Conservative group leader there, who talks about the role of local councils in safeguarding and educating children. And this is a fundamental responsibility of society that we need to have. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about schools, about the importance of getting children back at a time when the structure has been rather left alone. And then finally, a question from Siobhan Smith about the role that councils have done in working with local charities, voluntary and community groups, and what do you believe can be done to increase the capacity for recovery using those groups? Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Izzy. Well, to John's point, I think councils have an absolutely central role in leading their local economy forwards. In the short term, that's clearly about helping to safely reopen local economies. There's a huge amount of work for each of us to do, particularly in town and city centres and high streets, trying to open those shops, cafes and restaurants over the course of the summer, and to do so both safely but also swiftly, because every day and week that passes, it makes a real difference to those businesses to use the tools that are already available to councils, and some of those that we're currently legislating for, that I hope will be helpful to councils, the ability to pedestrianise, the ability to have outdoor seating available more swiftly for businesses to make use of, the extended working hours on a temporary basis so that construction sites can start up safely and have different start times and so on to ease the pressure on public transport. The solutions will be different in different parts of the country, but councils have an absolutely central role in trying to help their business community to get back to work. I think there's a big role also for councils in boosting confidence, because we need to instill confidence in the public that it is safe to return to work, it is safe to return to town and city centres. That's as applicable in a small market town as it is to central London. And looking slightly to the future, there's a really important role in councils planning strategically for the future of their area. And that will mean making use of some of the planning powers that are available to reimagine town centres and high streets, using the funding streams that we've made available at the Towns Fund and the High Streets Fund, which, as I say, we want to ensure we get that money out as quickly as possible so that those ambitious plans can be realised. And then thinking about the longer term role for councils in recovery. And that's why we've chosen that our devolution white paper is going to be more than that. It's going to be a recovery and devolution white paper, and look more broadly at the role of councils in leading the economic recovery in your own area. And I really want to engage productively with councils in having that conversation. To Robert's point about schools and the broader safeguarding issues, well, councils have obviously played a very important role in protecting vulnerable people through the crisis, and I'm very grateful for their support, the work that's been done by teachers, maintaining most schools so they're available for the children of key workers and vulnerable children, also maintaining contact with children who are not in school during this time. For me, it is absolutely essential now that we get all children back to school in September. I wish we'd done so sooner, but I think it's absolutely essential that we fulfill that objective. And so we have a big job on our hands, the Department for Education, myself and my department, to any extent that we can help, and yourselves as councils, to do everything in our power to make sure that happens in all parts of the country, to give confidence to parents that it can be done safely, to help to support teachers and head teachers in making those preparations and thinking imaginatively about how they can be done. School sites are cramped, then thinking about other facilities nearby, whether that's churches or village halls or community assets that can be brought into the mix to do it. We must fulfill that, because it's a broader moral mission that we can't allow children to fall behind. It will be the children from the most deprived homes who will slip back as a result of this pandemic. We've got to get those children back to school in September. So I would really urge you to play your part in that mission and to work intensively with us over the summer period to make that happen. And with respect to Siobhan's point about working with voluntary groups, well, one of the most uplifting things about the work of councils over the last few months has been their ability to harness civil society, faith groups, voluntary groups in their community, and national government efforts like the NHS volunteers, for example, which in many respects were triumphs themselves, and that so many people came forward, actually were proven not to be as necessary as some people thought, because councils were so good at a grassroots level at harnessing their own voluntary communities. And I'd like to think that there are ways in which we can keep that going. We certainly need to be aware, as we prepare for the future, that there may be instances in local lockdowns, or if we have a second peak of the virus, when we will need to re-engage with those groups to deliver food to the shielded, for example. And so I would really urge councils to continue to work to strengthen those links and have them ready if we need them again later in the year.
We've got a few minutes more, just about 7 minutes. So if I capture another few, can I just say that Councillor Ian Stewart from the Isle of Wight wonders if there will be any more information coming about the reopening of high streets, and thank you for what you have done so far on that. There was also a question from the Councillor Sean Donnelly. Can you promise to ensure that the government departments that you work with each value local councillors and are fully supportive of the local lockdown and the work that we are doing to promote those? And just finally, one more question. And may I just at this point say every question virtually has been prefaced with thank you for joining us here today. I think the other question was from independent councillor from Devon, who, I've just lost it at the moment, so please live with me for a moment. So thank you yet again for all the work that you've done and the central government's work in supporting the pandemic for communities and business. It's quite clear that we are going to need more funding to get the economy and services going again. I wonder if you would agree that councils have been and will be best placed to drive forward the recovery post-COVID. Over to you.
Thanks, Izzy. Well, as I said, I do think that councils play an absolutely central role in driving forward the local economy. And as I say, you see that in the work that councils are doing to open up high streets. You see it in the regeneration efforts that councils are doing, and hopefully that will be supported by the funding streams that we're making available, whether that's on brownfield land, towns funds, high streets funds, and so on. It will be important that councils have the funding that they need to do that work. And that's really what belies what we've announced today. We've moved away from simply providing, albeit large sums of money, but sums of money which are not in themselves a comprehensive plan, to a plan which of course can be refined in time as we learn more about the impact of the virus, but a plan which I hope gives a sense of confidence and stability for the future, because it's a plan that can flex up and down depending on how things pan out over the rest of the financial year. And the commitment that we've made, in particular on sales fees and charges, as I said in my opening remarks, is one which could run to many billions of pounds on some of the more maximalist forecasts of what the rest of the financial year will look like. It may not be the case, because it may be that actually those car parks and so on are able to reopen and revenues start to flow faster than some people are predicting. But it's the certainty, I think, that's important for councils, so that you know that you can focus on the big task ahead, which is continuing to control the virus while supporting economic recovery, not distracted by concerns about your financial position. To Sean's point, well, I very much hope that my colleagues across government do value the role of local councillors and do see the central importance of councils in continuing to control the virus, and of your public health officers in ensuring that they spot trends, take action swiftly, and if a local lockdown is unfortunately required, as we've seen in Leicester, that they're at the absolute heart of making that happen. I appreciate there's been concern about the availability of data. All councils will be able to access the full suite of data, assuming that they fulfil the requirement on data protection, which is a relatively simple, I think, understandable one. But that data will be available both to upper tier councils, it should be already, but also to lower tier councils as well, so that you can understand what is happening in your local community at a granular level and then can act accordingly. And the Health Secretary will also be providing guidance in the coming days, which sets out the powers so that it's clear for everybody to see the powers available to local councils and to ministers should you need to take action to close particular premises or public spaces or events, or to escalate those issues to ministers, to do so on a somewhat broader canvas, as we've had to do in Leicester, for example. And so I think that will provide much greater clarity and help to answer council's legitimate concerns about what should you be doing and what should ministers be doing in the event of a local lockdown being required. And then lastly, to Ian's point from the Isle of Wight, well, we have provided quite extensive guidance about reopening high streets safely. If you feel there's more, then please do get in contact. We've also made available funding to help with through the Reopening High Street Safely Fund, which can pay for things like small changes on high streets, like putting out proper signage and marking out social distancing requirements. It can also be used for advertising campaigns. And my colleague Simon Clark will say a bit more about that when he speaks to you tomorrow, because without stealing his thunder, we're going to make a bit more money available, which can be used to boost the marketing of high streets, to get domestic tourism going and to promote everything that's good about your town and city centres and your high streets, to try to attract people in safely over the course of the summer.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State. There are literally hundreds of questions, or hundreds of support for questions, and I know that we have run up against the wall of your time, but I just need to leave with you a couple of thoughts. There's real concern about leisure centres, which you will probably have picked up from some of the questions, and also the opportunity of how we might be able to use discretionary grants a little bit better to get local businesses up and running. But with those thoughts, I really want to say a massive thank you to you for joining us on our first virtual conference. And it's been a learning lesson over the last few days. I hope people feel that this has gone as well as they would have hoped. I'm sure there are questions that they wish that we could have asked, and we will all do our level best to try to get those across to the department and get some responses back in time. But on behalf of my Conservative office and group, and on behalf of our sponsors, the CCLA, thank you so much for joining us today, Robert. Thank you.
Thanks, Izzi, and thank you to everybody. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye-bye.